beneath starlight crimson. Furred cat watches mannequin unravel thread by thread, emitting bone. Resonating tremors. The thrum of the threads vibrates up through the wet concrete floor. Into my boots, rattling my teeth. My beekeeping gloves rasp against the slick surface as I crouch, the sound sharp in the unnatural quiet. The cat's fur, deep crimson like coagulated blood under the 734,928 starlight, seems to pulse with the tremors. A slow, wet heartbeat against the grey stone. The mannequin, once a figure of cloth and wire, now a ruin, shudders as threads snap, one by one, leaving behind tattered lace and dust motes dancing in the sterile light. Territorial conflict, I think. The phrase a cold comfort against the dread coiling in my gut. Like a hive after a swarm's betrayal. Asterisk my fingers, stiff with cold. Brush the cold. Wet concrete beside the rusted observatory entrance. Something cold and hard presses against my knuckle. I pull it free, a severed finger. Not broken but cleanly severed. The skin pale and waxy under the streetlight orange bleeding into the starlight. It's unnaturally still. No blood. Just that quiet, impossible stillness. I clean it meticulously with the damp sleeve of my coat, the fabric rough against the cold bone. Like broken comb bee, I tell myself. The thought a desperate mantra. The Queen's comb shattered a sign. Asterisk, I ignore the way the finger's knuckle seems to point towards the observatory's dark, water-filled aperture. The cat watches me, its yellow eyes unblinking, reflecting the pale starlight like chips of tarnished gold. It's just a cat, I insist. Though the way its fur seems to throb in time with the mannequin, his tremors feels like a warning. A shift in the air, thick with the smell of damp stone and something older, metallic, proximity. The thought flickers. But I dismiss it. Focus on the comb. Asterisk the threads on the mannequin vibrate faster now. A frantic fund thrum. Thrum, thrum, thrum. Shaking loose more dust that hangs like grey snow in the air. The tremors deepen, vibrating my spine, a physical pressure in my ears. The wet concrete floor feels suddenly colder beneath my knees. I lift the finger, turning it slowly. The pale skin catches the streetlight orange, the edges bleeding into the grey. And then, beneath the vibration, beneath the thrumming threads, I hear it. A distorted echo, like a voice filtered through thick water. Asterisk, Genevieve. The hive. It's broken. Asterisk my sister's voice. But she's gone. I never heard her say that. Asterisk the echo shatters the fragile calm I've built. A jagged sound in my skull. I clutch the finger tighter, the bone digging into my palm. Not her. Just the tremors. Just the water. Asterisk but the echo lingers, a ghost in the vibration. The mannequin's threads snap with a sound like tearing silk. A sudden sharp through zip that cuts through the thrumming. Dust rains down from the ceiling, hitting the water, slick floor with tiny wet twin plopsy. The tremors intensify, becoming a deep, resonant twin boom that vibrates my jaw, shakes the water in the observatory. The wet concrete grey floods my vision, the streetlight orange bleeding into the edges like ink in water. The finger in my hand feels suddenly heavy, cold, wrong. The cat's crimson fur flares a deep, wet crimson against the grey, and its yellow eyes fix on me, unblinking. The tremors reach a crescendo, a physical force pressing against my eardrums, a sound that isn't T-sound but pure vibration in the marrow. The mannequin's remaining threads hang, vibrating violently, silent now. The echo of my sister's voice returns, clearer this time, distorted and layered asterisk. Broken comb, broken. Asterisk. And then, cutting through the bone, deep vibration through the grey and orange, through the echo of a conversation I never had, comes the sound. A single, deafening chatter that echoes in the silence, though no object breaks. The bees move in slow, deliberate arcs, their wings a thrum, that should be steady, rhythmic to a hymn. But now it is layered with something else, a distortion slipping beneath the familiar vibration. A voice. Genevieve. Asterisk not mine, not entirely. The words slither through the hive, murmur, wet and warped, like a drowning person, last breath, dragged through the mud, asterisk disappearing like the ones before. I don't move. My fingers hover over the frame, the wax still warm from their passage. The bees don't react. They never do, but the air does. It shudders, just for a second, like the surface of a pond when something heavy sinks beneath it. The starlight, *734,928*, bleeds through the cracks in the roof, casting long fingers of gray and orange across the combs. The wax glistens, thick and golden, but beneath it, the honey runs slow, sluggish, as if the hive itself is holding its breath. The comb is wrong. The words aren't T in my head. They re in the air. In the way the bees press closer to the frame, their bodies humming against the wood like a warning. I should pull my gloves off. I should check the mirror. But my hands stay where they are, fingers curled around the edge of the frame, the wax sticking to my skin like a second layer of honey. The mirror. I don't remember deciding to go. But there I am, standing in the observatory, as abandoned wing, the floor slick with something that is water. The air smells like rust and old smoke, like the inside of a clock that stopped ticking. The mirror is there, propped against the far wall, its surface reflecting nothing but the gray stone and the crimson cat, now coiled like a spring, its eyes 2 chips of tarnished gold in the dim light. I reach out. The glass is cold, colder than it should be. My breath fogs the surface for half a second before the reflection shudders. Not the mirror, not yet. And there I am, standing in the hive, my fingers still on the frame, the bees a blur of motion around me. But then the reflection shifts. The hive melts away, replaced by the observatory, by me, but wrong, the edges of my reflection flicker, like a broken film reel, and behind me, a shape. Humanoid. Not quite solid. Not quite twiddy there. Its form is made of threads, of flickering static, of something that moves when it shouldn't. It doesn't speak, it doesn't need to. The earth reverberates with its presence, a deep, resonant treven that presses against my ribs, against my teeth. The cat is in the reflection now, too. It doesn't look away. Its eyes lock onto the shape, unblinking, and the crimson fur seems to twin pulse, in time with the thrumming. The reflection of my hand trembles on the glass. The bees' thrum, is gone, replaced by the distorted whisper, louder now, clearer, The comb is broken. Like the ones before, I don't. Pull my hand back. I press harder. The mirror doesn't shatter, but the air does. A crack, sharp and sudden, like ceramic breaking underfoot, but not twunderfoot, not twedder, not tweddy hair. The reflection foot split sea, not the glass, the space behind it. A fissure opens, black and jagged, like a wound in the world. The thrumming becomes a roar, a physical force pressing against my eardrums, and the cat floss, deep crimson against the gray, its eyes wide, its mouth parted as if it's screaming. But no sound comes, only the fish shatter, not of glass, of something older, something deeper. The crack spreads. The mirror doesn't break, but the air does. The loop, it claws at my vision, a relentless reel of decay. The beekeeping tools, the smoker, the hive tool, the veil, crumble into dust within the reflection, each particle a tiny mocking echo of something lost. And there, nestled amongst the disintegration, the severed tip. It glows now, a sickly internal luminescence that bleeds into the gray of the stone walls. 734,928 starlight pulses behind it. A frantic, insistent rhythm. It's not reflecting anything anymore. It's degenerating to my... I blink, trying to scrub the image from my eyes. But the wet concrete gray of the observatory, as abandoned wing presses in, heavy and suffocating. The streetlight orange flares at the edges of my vision, a creeping burn that threatens to consume everything. It is not just the light. It is the feeling of it, a physical weight against my eyelids, the entity. It's clearer now, less a flicker, and more a presence, a humanoid shape woven from the same fractured starlight that illuminates the mirror. It doesn't move, not in the conventional sense. It shifts, its form resolving and dissolving like a corrupted data stream. It's not solid, but the distortion it creates is undeniably real, a ripple in the air that makes the hairs on my arms stand on end. I try to anchor myself, to focus the bees. Their pattern there, there's a coded warning there, I know it. Something within the arrangement of the combs, a message etched in wax and honey. If I can just decipher it, I can understand. The mirror, as hum intensifies. It's not a sound anymore, not exactly. It's a suppressor, a vibration that resonates deep within my skull, a mechanical pulse that threatens to shatter my teeth. It has the same frequency as the bees, thrum but twisted, corrupted, like a signal scrambled by interference. Thrum, thrum, thrum. Wrong. Asterisk. I squeeze my eyes shut, willing the pressure to subside. The image of the glowing fingertip burns behind my eyelids. Genevieve. The name echoes in the silence, a phantom whisper that isn't mine. It is a memory, a fragment of a conversation I can, too quite grasp, a feeling of profound loss that clings to me like a shroud. The cat. It sits motionless at the edge of the reflection, a sentinel of crimson fur. The streetlight orange catches on its coat, making it appear as if it is radiating heat. It doesn't blink. Its eyes, those chips of tarnished gold, are fixed on the entity. Unwavering, accusatory. A low growl rumbles in its chest, a vibration that I feel more than hear. Gigra, thrum. Gurra. Asterisk. I try to breathe. But the air feels thick, viscous, like inhaling honey. The taste of salt water rises in my throat. I can feel the tears welling, stinging my eyes. I should wipe them away, but my hand feels heavy, disconnected. I watch, mesmerized as a single tear escapes and slides down my cheek. It hits the floor, a sharp sudden shatter. Not of glass, something deeper, something older. The mirror. Some reaches a crescendo, a deafening roar that drowns out everything else. The streetlight orange explodes, blinding me, consuming my vision. The wet concrete gray recedes, replaced by a swirling vortex of white light. I gasp, clutching at my head, trying to ward off the pain. The shatter echoes again, louder this time, reverberating through my bones. White. The groans of the observatory aren't from its bones, they're from its 717. The stone walls exhale, a wet, rasping sigh that carries the scent of damp earth and something older, something like rusted nails left to soak in rainwater. My fingers twitch toward the bees, the only constant in this place, the only thing that hasn't warped. Their hive hums, a low electric thrum that vibrates through my ribs, a counterpoint to the observatory's labored breathing. I trace the combs with my thumb, the wax cool and slick, almost like a pulse. 7 the fendile most. Then, the fen shifted, not a sound, but a pressure, a sudden drag of air that makes my hair stand on end. The mirror's reflection flickers like a film reel caught in a projector. The entity is back. It resolves from the starlight, its edges jagged, its form stitching itself together from fragments of something that isn't light but 20 memory. The pulses return, this time not just in my skull, but in the walls themselves. It thrum, thrum. Wrong. A voice, not in my ears but in the marrow of my bones. Your sister vanished when she saw the mirror, like the others. The words aren't spoken. They're extracted by, pulled from the air like teeth from a jaw. The observatory groans in response, its walls flexing inward as if something massive is pressing against them from below. I don't look down. I can't. My eyes are locked on the bees. The only thread left. The hive's pattern isn't random. It's a code. It has to be. The ceramic vase is already broken. I don't remember moving. 1 second. It's intact on the shelf. Its surface smooth as a closed eyelid. The next, it's shattered. The pieces scattered like teeth across the stone. The entity is gone, but its absence leaves a smell, ozone, and something sweet, like overripe fruit left too long in the sun. The shards rearrange themselves, slow at first, then faster forming words. Find them. The ceramic groans as it moves, each piece grinding against another, a sound like a knife dragged across bone. My breath is too loud in my own ears. The beekeeping knife is in my hand before I realize I've drawn it. The blade is cold, its edge dull from years of cutting wax. I press the tip to my palm, just enough to break the skin. The first drop of blood wells, thick and dark, a slow motion leak. It hits the stone, splatters against the ceramic fragments, and the letters swinburne into existence. Find them. The blood steams, not from heat but from the wrongness of it. The way the observatory's light distorts everything. The cat hasn't moved. Its crimson fur is a living stain in the mirror's reflection. Its eyes 2 embers in the dark. They glow now, not gold but something deeper, something like molten copper. It watches me. It what it knows. The growl starts again, a low, rhythmic vibration that thrums in my chest. Tivia thrum, gra thrum. It's not for me. It's for me. It's 14 to T. The thing beneath the water. I don't see the shadow until it's too late. It rises from the blackness of the submerged floor, a coalescence of ink and something worse. Something that isn't liquid but twin-soundan, a distortion of the observatory's groans. It doesn't have edges. It unfolds. The cat's tail lashes, its fur standing on end, and then it's silent. The mirror's reflection ripples, and for a second I see Fifiti Genevieve younger, her hands covered in wax, her eyes wide with something like terror. The shadow stretches, reaching, and the reflection twin screams. The ceramic shatters again, not the pieces on the floor, the fuivas itself. Whoosh! It reassembles in midair, the fragments snapping together with a sound like 1,000 teeth chattering at once. The letters reform, but this time they're not words. Their teeth are sharp, hungry. The blood on the stone bubbles, hissing like fat in a pan. The cat's eyes burn and then the thud. Not a sound, a farther wait. The shadow has a form now, a hand pressing against the mirror's surface from the other side. The glass doesn't break. It tweeps in. The water below rises, a slow creeping tide, and the observatory groans one last time. The bees stop humming. The observatory's floor is cold beneath my bare feet. Wet concrete, slick with a film I can't quite identify. Something oily, something ancient. The scent is overwhelming. Wet concrete, streetlight orange bleeding into the damp stone, a cloying sweetness that clings to the back of my throat. I dream of trampled ground, of shadowy figures moving through overgrown gardens, their forms indistinct, their purpose unclear. I wake with the taste of dirt in my mouth, the bees they've moved, not just to the main chamber but to the into. The air vibrates with their industry, a frantic electric hum that claws at my teeth. Their weaving, constructing, their tiny bodies a blur of motion. It's not the familiar hexagonal pattern of the hive. This is different. This is deliberate. I kneel, the cold seeping into my bones, and trace the emerging form with a trembling finger. Wax, warm and pliable, clings to my skin. It coalesces, takes shape. They are here. The words aren't carved, not precisely. They're built, a language of honeycomb and pollen, a frantic plea rendered in the geometry of the hive. The crimson cat sits beside the structure, a living stain against the starlight, its eyes twin embers burning into my skull. It doesn't blink. It doesn't move. It simply watches. The observatory groans, a low, mournful sigh that seems to emanate from the very stone. Wrong. I ignore it. I have to. Focus. The bee's pattern shifts again, the wax reforming with unsettling speed. My breath hitches in my chest. This isn't natural. This isn't the gentle rhythm of the hive. This is a message, a warning. She is the key. The words rearrange themselves, the honeycomb collapsing and rebuilding with a brittle frecken key. Genevieve, my sister. The name echoes in the chamber, a hollow resonance that amplifies the observatory's labored breathing. The air thickens, the scent of overripe fruit intensifies. I press my fingers to my temples, trying to block out the buzzing, the groaning, the suffocating weight of the observatory itself. The cat's fur seems to absorb the starlight, drawing it inward, deepening the crimson to a shade that borders on black. It's a visual anomaly, a distortion of the light that makes my stomach churn. I force myself to look away, to focus on the bees, on the code they're building. It is a desperate attempt to cling to something tangible, something real. The mirror. I should look at the mirror, but I can't. The thought alone sends a jolt of nausea through me. I remember her face reflected in that glass, her eyes wide with a terror I couldn't comprehend. The others, the ones who vanished, the ones who saw, the hive structure becomes more chaotic. The pattern fractures, the wax dripping like tears. A new phrase emerges, fragmented, incomplete. Fofened, lost, behind. The observatory groans louder, the stone walls flexing inward, pressing against my chest. Thrum. Wrong. The bee's hum intensifies, a deafening roar that threatens to shatter my eardrums. The scent of overripe fruit becomes unbearable, a cloying sweetness that coats my tongue. I stumble backward, knocking against a table, sending a cascade of dust motes dancing in the starlight. The crimson cat doesn't flinch. It remains motionless, a silent sentinel guarding a secret I'm terrified to uncover. The last phrase appears, a final, desperate plea rendered in the frantic geometry of the hive. Water. The hive collapses. It's not a gradual disintegration. It's a sudden, catastrophic failure. A shattering ceramic crunch echoes through the chamber as the wax structure implodes, sending fragments of honeycomb raining down around me. The sound is sharp, jarring, a brutal interruption of the observatory's mournful sigh. The air shimmers, the starlight distorts. and for a fleeting moment I see a glimpse of something beneath the water, something dark, something vast, something waiting. The wax clung to my fingers, a sickly sweetness coating my skin. I traced the fragmented honeycomb, the last desperate message twanting water, still echoing in the chamber. Genevieve. The key. The bees. It felt like a fever dream, a relentless cycle of decipherment and dread. My stomach gnawed at itself, a hollow ache that mirrored the emptiness in the observatory. Days bled into nights, marked only by the shifting patterns of starlight and the relentless hum of the bees. I hadn't eaten, hadn't slept. The bees demanded attention, their frantic industry a constant, buzzing pressure against my skull. The crimson cat remained, a silent, unsettling presence. Its fur seemed to absorb the light, deepening the crimson to a shade that pulsed with a malevolent energy. I tried to ignore it, to focus on the hive, but its gaze was inescapable, a burning brand against my sanity. Frinthram? Wrong. The observatory groaned, a mournful sigh that resonated deep within my bones. Then a voice, not spoken, not heard, but felt within the marrow of my skull. Your sister's last words were about the mirror's loop. Give me the memory of her smile. The words weren't a request, they were a demand. A cold certainty settled in my gut. It knew about Genevieve, about the mirror, about the loop. My breath hitched, a strangled gasp lost in the buzzing of the bees. The hive shifted, the wax reforming into a grotesque caricature of a smile, a mocking imitation of the joy I desperately clung to. I stumbled toward the mirror, the cold concrete slick beneath my bare feet. The air thickened, heavy with the scent of overripe fruit and something else, something metallic and faintly rotten. The mirror's surface shimmered, the familiar loop playing out 20 Genevieve, laughing, sunlight catching in her hair. A memory, a stolen moment. The entity pressed closer, an invisible weight on my chest. I closed my eyes, willing myself to relive it, to surrender the memory. Genevieve's laughter filled the chamber, a bittersweet echo of what I had lost. The hive pulsed, the crimson cat's eyes burning into my skull. I felt something slip away, a vital piece of myself torn from my grasp. It didn't take the whole memory, just fragments. Her laughter, the way her eyes crinkled at the corners. Not the fear, not the truth. It wanted only the surface, the palatable sweetness leaving the bitter core untouched. The bee's hum escalated, twisting into a discordant, unsettling drone. Cree-cree. Wrong. The observatory shuddered, the stone walls groaning under the strain. I recoiled from the mirror, nausea rising in my throat. The crimson cat's fur seemed to ripple, the color deepening to an almost unbearable intensity. Then, another message. The hive rebuilt itself, the wax forming a new, terrifying phrase. They are alive, alive. Genevieve. But where? What did it mean? The observatory's groans intensified, a cacophony of despair that threatened to overwhelm me. From, wrong. The scent of decay grew stronger, a suffocating blanket that pressed down on me. I clawed at my throat, desperate for air. The entity vanished as abruptly as it had appeared, leaving behind a chilling silence that was more terrifying than any noise. The bee's hum slowly subsided, returning to a frantic but less chaotic rhythm. And then I saw it. Lying on the cold concrete, a single bee wing. It was shaped like a hand, delicate and fragile, yet imbued with an unsettling power. The crimson cat watched, its eyes twin embers burning into my soul. It didn't move, it didn't blink, it simply observed. The wing began to disintegrate, the delicate structure crumbling into dust. A final, mournful, fun-shattering ceramic whisper filled the chamber as the last vestiges of the wing vanished into the starlight. The crimson cat moved with a purpose I hadn't observed before, a deliberate glide across the cold concrete. It wasn't a random patrol, it was guiding me. Each step it took seemed to vibrate through the floor, a low-frequency rumble that resonated deep within my bones, a physical manifestation of the dread that clung to me. The corridors themselves seemed to shift, subtly altering their geometry as the cat passed, the starlight reflecting off unseen angles. A disorientation not of the mind but of the very space I occupied. I followed, my bare feet slapping against the slick concrete. The air grew heavier with each step, a viscous pressure against my skin. It smelled of ozone and something else, something metallic, like old blood. The bees continued their frantic dance within the hive, a constant buzzing counterpoint to the rumbling that permeated the observatory. Thrum, vrung. Wrong. The feeling intensified, a discordant note in the symphony of my unraveling. The cat led me to a chamber unlike any I'd seen before. Water, not the dampness that clung to the walls, but a vast expanse of water, reflecting the starlight with an unnatural clarity. It wasn't the dull sheen of wet concrete, it was a liquid mirror, shimmering and distorted yet somehow perfect. The reflections weren't accurate, though. They were free wrong. The observatory's architecture twisted in the watery surface, becoming something alien and unsettling. I knelt, the cold seeping through my skin. The cat's footprints were visible in the water's surface, perfect imprints that resembled the flight path of a bee. An absurd interpretation, a desperate attempt to find order in the chaos. I clung to it, a lifeline in a sea of dread. The water lapped at my fingers, icy and strangely smooth. Funkry-cree. Wrong. The rumble intensified, vibrating through the water itself, and then I saw it. In the reflection, not behind me, but within the water, a figure. A humanoid form, but fractured, dissolving into the liquid. It wasn't solid, more like a heat haze shimmering above a burning surface. It seemed to coalesce from the starlight, a grotesque parody of a human shape, the entity. I didn't turn, I couldn't. My focus remained on the cat's footprints, tracing their path in the water. It was a delusion, I knew, a desperate attempt to impose meaning onto the meaningless. But I clung to it, terrified of what I might find if I dared to look directly at the reflection. The air thickened, a suffocating weight that pressed down on my chest. The scent of decay grew stronger, a cloying sweetness that made my stomach churn. The entity's form pulsed, its features shifting and reforming in the watery mirror. I felt a pressure against my mind, a probing sensation that made me recoil. It wasn't a voice, not exactly. More like an intrusion, a cold tendril of thought that brushed against my consciousness. Forgive. The memory. The words weren't formed, but too felt a visceral demand that resonated within my skull. My gaze remained fixed on the cat's footprints, the bee-like trails in the water. I was missing something vital. The entity's hand, pale and elongated, reached through the water's surface, the reflection distorting around it. It wasn't reaching for me, but for something far beyond me. Something in the water itself. The rumble reached a crescendo, a physical force that threatened to knock me off my feet. Frun, thrum, from. Wrong. The observatory groaned, a mournful sigh that echoed through the chamber. I felt a sharp pain behind my eyes, a burning sensation that blurred my vision. The starlight seemed to intensify, blindingly bright. A footstep, not from behind me, not from within the chamber, but from within the water itself. A distinct, echoing, shattering ceramic resonated through the liquid mirror, fracturing the reflection and sending a wave of icy water splashing against my skin. The shattering ceramic resonated, a physical blow against my skull. The water recoiled, a wave of frigid shock that stole my breath. I blinked, trying to clear the burning behind my eyes, the starlight still a blinding assault. The reflection, it fractured. Not just the entity's image, but the entire chamber. The observatory warped, twisting into a kaleidoscope of impossible angles, then snapping back to the familiar sterile concrete. And then she was there. My sister, Clara. Laughing, a sound I hadn't heard in years. It was a bright, lilting sound utterly incongruous with the oppressive dread that permeated the observatory. She stood near the water's edge, bathed in the streetlight orange that seemed to bleed from the walls. Her hair, the color of spun moonlight, cascaded around her shoulders. Impossible. Genevieve, she said, her voice echoing strangely, not from her lips, but from somewhere within the water itself. You're so serious. The rumble hadn't ceased, but it was overlaid now with a chorus of whispers. Not words, not exactly. Fragments of conversations overlapping and indistinct, a cacophony of voices just beyond the threshold of comprehension. Creaky, wrong. The wet concrete smell intensified, a cloying sweetness that coated my tongue. It was sickening, overwhelming. I wanted to reach for her, to touch her, to confirm that she was real, but a paralysis gripped me, a fear so profound it rooted me to the spot. The cat watched, its crimson fur a stark contrast against the shimmering water. It didn't blink. Didn't react, just watched he. The observatory shifted again. The water receded, revealing a glimpse of a sun-drenched meadow, a memory of a childhood picnic. Then, just as quickly, it vanished, replaced by the cold, sterile chamber. Clara's laughter echoed again, a mocking counterpoint to the rising panic in my chest. The mirror is the cage, she whispered, her image flickering, dissolving at the edges. The whispers intensified, coalescing into a single distorted phrase, Timvi give the memory. I squeezed my eyes shut, fighting against the encroaching chaos. The bee's hive pattern. It was a key. I'd seen it reflected in the water, a complex geometry that seemed to hold the answer to everything. I focused on it, clinging to it as a lifeline. The hive's hexagonal structure, the intricate arrangement of cells, it wasn't random. It was a code. But then the entity's voice cut through the whispers, a cold, invasive presence that resonated within my skull. You built it with your devotion. The words weren't spoken but felt there. A searing brand against my consciousness, my devotion. To what? To whom? The burning behind my eyes intensified, blurring my vision. I stumbled, my bare feet slipping on the slick concrete. The scent of decay was almost unbearable now, a suffocating weight that pressed down on my chest. The water began to churn, the reflections twisting and distorting into grotesque caricatures of reality. Clara's image fragmented further, dissolving into the streetlight orange that seemed to consume everything. The cat's eyes glowed, twin embers in the encroaching darkness. I tried to focus on the hive pattern to decipher its meaning, but the whispers grew louder, more insistent. They swirled around me, a vortex of fragmented memories and distorted truths. The rumble reached a fever pitch, a physical force that threatened to shatter my bones. Thrum, thrum, wrong, then silence. The whispers ceased, the rumble stopped, the observatory stilled, and Clara's final laugh cut to functuring ceramic silence. The silence descended like a physical weight, pressing against my eardrums, a vacuum where the cacophony had been. It wasn't peaceful, it was expectant. The absence of the pulses, the cessation of the whispers, amplified the ringing in my skull, a high-pitched whine that threatened to crack my teeth, wet concrete gray and streetlight orange. They bled, not exactly. It was a sensation, a merging of those two colors into a single searing presence that consumed my vision. Everything was filtered through that oppressive, suffocating hue. The hive pattern. I'd been clinging to it, desperately trying to decipher its logic. Now, it swam before my eyes, the hexagonal cells distorting, morphing into something else. Something alien. I felt a tremor in my hands, a fine, uncontrollable shaking that spread through my limbs. Some devotion. The entity's word resonated not as a sound, but as a bone-deep certainty. My devotion to the bees, to the hive. It wasn't a conscious act, this devotion. It was ingrained, a fundamental part of my being, as essential as breathing. Years spent tending the hives, the meticulous observation of their intricate society, the almost religious reverence I held for their ancient wisdom. It had all been fuel. Fuel for Few the Sivund, for the mirror loop. The realization struck me with the force of a physical blow, a sickening lurch in my stomach. Clara, her laughter, the fragmented memories of picnics in sun-drenched meadows. They weren't memories at all. They were echoes, distortions manufactured by the loop born from my obsession. She wasn't here, she hadn't been here for how long? The crimson cat shifted, its eyes glowing with an unsettling intensity. Twin embers in the orange haze. I tried to look away, but my gaze was locked, magnetized by that infernal light. The burning behind my eyes intensified, a searing pain that made me gasp. The wet concrete smell intensified, too, a cloying sweetness that threatened to choke me. It was a smell of decay, of something ancient and corrupted. And then I saw it. Not reflected in the mirror, but manifesting within the orange haze. A shimmering, fragmented form like a broken mosaic of light and shadow. It wasn't humanoid, not entirely. It was data. Raw, corrupted data, screaming silently. A torrent of information, distorted and twisted into a grotesque parody of a human shape. The entity, the thing that controlled the mirror, the thing that had stolen Clara. The realization was a tidal wave, washing over me, drowning me in despair. I hadn't been a mere observer, I had been a creator. My devotion, my meticulous care, my unwavering focus, it had all been a building block, a component in this monstrous creation. The bees, the hive, the mirror, it was all intertwined, a twisted web of my own making. The silence fractured, not with a sound, but with a sensation, a pressure against my skull, a feeling of being unraveled. The burning intensified, blinding me. I stumbled, my bare feet scraping against the slick concrete. I fell to my knees, clutching my head, trying to shut out the screaming data, the suffocating scent, the searing orange. I tasted blood, a metallic tang on my tongue. The hive pattern swam before my eyes, dissolving into a chaos of fragmented shapes. I tried to focus, to grasp at something solid, something real, but there was nothing. Only the orange, the screaming data, the crimson cat's glowing eyes. Then, a single, echoing, settering ceramic resonated in the void. The starlight wasn't soft. It was a physical pressure, a cold, hard weight pressing down through the submerged glass of the observatory walls. I blinked, my vision swimming in the wet concrete gray of the floor beneath me. the streetlight orange bleeding upwards from the waterline. The bees weren't humming, they were constructing point. Their tiny bodies, glistening with wet concrete, fused into the walls, forming the honeycomb lattice of the observatory itself. Each cell pulsed with a soft internal light, casting long, distorted shadows that seemed to breathe. The hive is the mirror, the thought echoed, cold and sharp as a bee sting. Footy me devotion was the cage. Hooty. The realization wasn't a shock. It was the slow, inevitable dissolution of a dam holding back a flood of horror. Clara wasn't stolen. She was unmade in the process of my obsession. The crimson cat sat perfectly still in the center of the observatory, its fur not just blood-red but tough and coagulating, merging seamlessly with the wet concrete floor. Its eyes were twin embers burning brighter than the streetlight orange, fixed on me. I tried to push myself up, my bare knees scraping against the slick, cold stone. The air smelled of ozone and wet earth, thick enough to choke on. Then, behind the cat, the orange haze rippled. For a fractured second, the entity's fragmented data stream form solidified sullen, not the screaming mosaic, but Clara's face. Her eyes wide with terror, her mouth open in a silent scream that echoed the distorted hum of the bees. But her features weren't flesh. They were bleeding into lines of corrupted code, pixels dissolving like wet ink, her face bleeding into code. The sight wasn't just a vision, it was a physical blow to my chest, stealing my breath. The pulse sequence began again. Not a sound, but a vibration deep in my molars, a rhythmic thrum, thrum, that resonated with the bee's construction hum. It grew, intensifying, weaving through the observatory's structure, making the wet concrete walls shudder, harmonizing. The bee's work, my devotion. The entity's hunger, fugi. All converging on this single, unbearable frequency. The burning behind my eyes flared, a white-hot needle piercing my skull. I saw the fragmented data screaming, felt the metallic tang of blood on my tongue where I'd bitten my lip. The observatory walls dissolved like salt in water, the honeycomb lattice dissolving into swirling currents of the submerged, oily water. The cat remained, a stark, silent island in the dissolving world, Tafuri Clara. The name was a silent scream in my mind. The entity's form flickered again behind the cat, Clara's face momentarily clear, then dissolving back into screaming data. The pulse even thrummed louder, shaking the water, the concrete, my very bones. I had to touch it. I had to know. The cat was the anchor, the signal, the only solid thing left in the unraveling world. My hand stretched out, fingers trembling, reaching for the cat's fur, for the only warmth in the suffocating orange and gray. The fur felt like cold, wet velvet, yet it seemed to glow with the cat's own internal fire. Just a touch, just to feel real. My fingertip brushed the deep crimson fur. The sound wasn't a crash. It was a high, pure cracker that split the air, impossibly sharp. Then the wet twin shatter of countless tiny fragments. Not glass, ceramic. The sound echoed in the dissolving water, in the pulse, in the screaming data. The cat's form dissolved into a million glittering, blood-red shards that scattered like broken porcelain across the water's surface. The observatory walls vanished completely. The streetlight orange dissolved into pure, blinding white noise. The pulse sequence reached its peak, harmonizing with the shattering sound, and the world imploded inward, silent and total, as the ceramic fragments rained down.